Speaking of the NFL Draft Combine, all the activities get underway here on Thursday. They will run through the weekend. Tom, I know it's one of your favorite events of the year. You and Danny both covered the NFL Draft for CBS Sports on multiple platforms. So what are you looking for, Tom, from the Draft Combine? Just either it could be players, it could be narratives. Like, what are some of the things that you're really fired up about this weekend?
I'll enjoy all of it. There's certain aspects, like the one thing with the quarterbacks that kind of stinks, but you expect it every year, is like Caleb's not throwing, Drake May's not throwing, Jaden Daniels not throwing, and it makes sense because they have nothing to gain by doing so. If you look around, they're the top 3 quarterbacks on most people's boards. You look at the mocks, almost all 3 of them are going in the top 10, if not the first 3 picks in a lot of them. So they've only got, they can only hurt their status by making a few bad throws and get situations that don't matter. So, but I do think one of those, the combine to me is fun because you get to see players in an element where there's a lot of pressure on them, but it's not really, I don't know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not really replicable in game action. You're just kind of finding out who they are as athletes. You're not finding out who they are as football players. I think that's probably the best way to put it. But I do think you will see JJ McCarthy's stock rise, because I think that once people see what JJ McCarthy can do with a football, they'll be like, oh, Michigan just didn't have him throw because they didn't need to, because they could just maul you to death with their run game. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to watching the offensive lineman, just because I always look forward to watching the offensive lineman. And speaking of Michigan, somebody I think that didn't get a ton of attention, that the more I've watched McCarthy tape, he kind of stands out, is Keegan, their left guard, who I thought against both Washington and Alabama was the best offensive lineman on the team in those 2 games. I think he's somebody who you could see his stock rise. And then another one is, you haven't heard a lot about the defensive tackles in this class. Like, you've seen Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton get projected as first rounders in a lot of mocks, but that's typically it. Like, T'Vondre Sweat is not seen as a first round pick. And other guys, I think somebody who isn't mentioned a lot who could really, really boost their stock, Rukaroro, is
Clemson.
We know who he is, the Clemson defensive tackle, but he's not somebody you see in a lot of mocks as being a first round pick. Hell, I don't even know if people have him second or third. I think his stock can really improve because he's somebody who I think is going to flourish in a setting like this. And then 2 players I really want to see, and I doubt one of them ends up running, but I kind of want him to. I'll start with Chop Robinson is my number 1 edge rusher in this class. I don't think it's a great edge rushing class. I think once you get Chop Robinson in a combine setting, his stock is going to absolutely skyrocket, because he doesn't have the great production at Penn State as far as sacks, but Penn State used him in a lot of different ways, and athletically, he is very, very special. And I think if you wanted to just make him a pure pass rusher, he'd be very good at it. If you wanted to use him as a Swiss Army knife, he'd be very good at it. But what I really want to see, I want to see Malik Nabers run the 40, because let's see. Malik Nabers has SYP speed, and that stands for something I can't say in here. We'll just say poop your pants speed. And I want to see him in the 40, because I do think he could be like 4.2-ish, if not below. So that will be really interesting to see for me.
I'm trying to think, do the quarterbacks, do they throw in alphabetical order? Is that how they're numbered?
Yes.
So if I'm JJ McCarthy, I might switch my name so I'm further. I might go by like your middle name so you're further away from Joe Milton. Because, because if he has to go right before that bazooka comes out, it's going to make it look like he's got a little pea shooter. I'm telling you, that guy, I'm fascinated to see what Milton does. Like, if the scouts, if he's able to impress, or if he's like throwing it all over and it's not hitting any receivers and it's just, spraying it all over the yard. But I'm with you. I think JJ McCarthy has the most to gain because there's the absence of the top 3 guys. Like, he has a massive opportunity. And I'll be honest, I'm bummed that the top 3 aren't throwing, because I do think that Drake May and Jaden Daniels do have something to play for. It's who's better. Like, who's going to go ahead of you. And I would say even more so Drake May. Like, I'm surprised he's not throwing, because Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner, he can go look at the tape. Like, the inconsistency Drake May showed, I do think is valid criticism, even with the lack of offensive line and lack of weapons around him. I think he could erase some of those doubts and criticisms by going and tearing it up. The reason quarterbacks don't throw, though, it's become the standard, is like in 50 throws, you want to complete 50 or 48 of them. Like, in the order to do that, you need to know your receivers, your guys, a very scripted routine workout where you're throwing, you know exactly I'm going to throw 3 quick outs, 3 deep outs, and I'm going to hit a deep end, like, and then the post, then a fade. Like, they know every single route. It's so scripted. But remember last year, CJ Stroud like really cemented his position. And I thought he made himself a lot of money because there was, as easy as it is to look now and be like, oh yeah, duh, he was the 2nd overall pick and he had the rookie of the year. There were concerns about CJ coming out. It was like, hey, can he take the hits? And thank goodness he had the game against Georgia, but I thought he solidified his status. I remember, I don't know who it was, but it was like, that might have been the best throwing performance we've ever seen. And he left unequivocally, no doubt. And I think Drake May or Jaden Daniels could have really cemented themselves as the 2 if they would have thrown. And I wonder if some of it is between these 2. Oh, he's not throwing. I'm not going to throw,
Mhm.
Which
I
I
do
don't
think
love.
going back to what you said, I push back a little bit. I mean, Drake May was inconsistent. I'm not pushing back against that, but I think Jaden Daniels was more inconsistent than May. I just think that Jaden's big plays were huge. Because like when you watch LSU tape, it is remarkable. Like I sent you guys that screenshot from yesterday. I was watching the Florida game, and he's got 3 open receivers, and he's not under any pressure. And he takes off running, and he's got like one of them is Malik Neighbors in the middle of the field without a Florida Gator within 10 yards of him, and it's like, why aren't you throwing that pass? But more than that, like Jaden misses a lot of like layups, and he misses them like by feet, not inches. So I think when he hits, he's just got such a boom or bust. And I think, and again, I voted for him for the Heisman, so it's not like I thought he had a bad year. It's just I do think that when you're looking at him as an NFL prospect, all these guys, when you watch them, they miss throws. It's like there's no perfect player out there. It's not everybody that's making perfect throws. And it's like you nitpick them to death over it. It's just, I felt like Jaden missed a lot more easy throws than anybody else that I've seen so far that I've been watching. So that'll be interesting. But this is going off subject here a little bit. Question for you, Danny. I have noticed when I'm watching these guys, it's not to a man, but almost all of them are much better on the touch deep throws. But on anything where they really have to drive the ball, the accuracy completely drops off like pretty noticeably. Is that possibly a reflection of like the 7-on-7 kind of thing where you're tossing all these little fades and stuff against air, and it's just you get really good at it, but anytime you got to squeeze a ball in there, these guys just don't have the experience?
Yes, I think it's that. I think it's also the lack of fundamentals, which have kind of been embraced by the younger generation of quarterbacks, like watching Patrick Mahomes. I think we even talked about that. Like this is the reason that I think Caleb Williams is getting compared to Patrick Mahomes is style of play is very similar. Like the footwork is out the window. Our buddy Rajah Bell used to work with us at CBS Sports HQ, has a son who's awesome. And I was watching some tape of his son. He sent me some film to break down. And you can see the way he's training is more off balance, throwing off the wrong foot, throwing on the run. Very rarely do you take 5 steps, 7 steps, hitch, and set your feet firm and rip it, on a line and you just don't see quarterbacks do that anymore. And so I do think the lack of just making those throws, repetition is what breeds the inaccuracy, because a lot of those, when you like the harder you try to throw it, your feet, if they're not balanced or you overstride or you understride or whatever your tendency is to do, you're going to be more inaccurate. And if you're not doing it a whole lot, then I think it's a great point.
Because it's not the flick. The flick is the touch.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that
without. The flick is all the rage right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you need to drive, you've got to have like feet that are planted so you can throw through your whole hips and everything.
Yeah. It's like incredible. I'll be watching the tape and it'll be a 40-yard throw from like the far hash to the sideline where the receiver's got no room to the outside. And it's just perfectly placed in a bucket like 90% of the time. But like a 10-yard slant over the middle and he's missing by 15 feet, and it's like, how does that happen repeatedly?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think the interesting thing about the combine, Danny, back to what you were saying in terms of like knowing exactly what you are going to do. It's are you smart or are you good at taking a test? Right. Like I'm always sort of like a hypersensitive to that, not to overreact one way where I'm thinking that one guy's going to be awesome based on how they perform over the weekend in Indianapolis, when I'm sure they've got a camp that's done everything to make sure that they're going to get all the right grades. And then at the same time, I'm also not going to bail on someone who on tape has been very excellent at what they do because they just fell short. Because it's always hard for me. I always come out of the combine interested to hear what NFL people have to say about these guys, because while there are so many examples of why your octagon score can like show how you're excellent at all these different things based on how you test, I'm always kind of a tape guy myself.
You always should be. That should be the number one priority, is what did you do in a real football game?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what you do against there. Like the Zach Wilson, that was one that drove me nuts. Remember his pro day?
Yes.
He made
all the Mahomes throws.
Yeah, it was like the reverse out, throw back across your body.
Mixtape.
And I mean, if you could go back and get some of the evaluators' comments, it's like, that might be the best throw I've ever seen in the history of mankind. And it's like, so like, how many of those did he make at BYU? And sure enough, like, he was the ultimate example of like a workout warrior. Lige and I were doing a thing on Spotlight the other day. It was like, how much are you interested in the combine? And we put it like at a 3 out of 10. Because it's like, it's fun. And I get it from the fan. Like, I'll watch. Like, it's fun to watch the 40s. It's fun to watch and see how far they can throw it. But from an evaluation standpoint, it should be like a 3. It's just kind of confirmation. That's why there's a growing list of head coaches who aren't even going.
Hey, but the Washington owner is. They shows how dedicated he is to the process.
Yeah, he wants that honestly, TV time. He's still first year.
I think the most valuable aspect of the combine for me is the linemen and the linebackers, just to see, because when you put them through some of those drills, you see how well they can move and change speed. Mm-hmm. And while like a defensive tackle is not probably going to have to make that kind of move in a game, knowing that he can do it just gives you an idea of how athletic he is, which kind of tells you what you're getting. So,
you know what the most valuable to me would be? The one that we don't get. I would love if you could pay a subscription fee to get access to the meetings, the closed door meetings. I would watch that. And I do think, like, and you guys know this, I think I've told you guys this here. Like, there are 2 quarterbacks that I completely changed my mind on after I spent 10 to 15 minutes interviewing them. It was Justin Herbert when he was coming out of Oregon. There was always shy. He's not a good leader. Met him, did an interview with him, and was like, oh, he's just kind of quiet. But he had like a quiet confidence about him. The other one was CJ Stroud last year. I was very much, like I mentioned, like, I don't know if he can do it. He didn't rise under pressure against Michigan. Spent 10, 15 minutes with him. And he wasn't that great with media. But like he kind of opened up, and it was a little bit just more personable. And I saw it in a different way. I was like, oh, this guy can command a locker room. Like, he's got it. And like totally changed my complexion. So I look at it and I wish we could get those interviews, because I do think those you would glean a lot of information. I think that's what the coaches do too. Like, that first impression matters.
I would love to see the Bears interviews, because Matt Eberflus challenges them all to a game of darts or a game of like putting. And he lets them pick which one you want to do. And he just wants to see how competitive they are and how they handle. Yeah.
I like that. So I was on right after Danny on Tuesday, and Tom, the icebreaker to start the 1 o'clock hour was, how many reps could you get up? And Brady was claiming he could still hit his combine numbers.
Pretty much. And if you remember, so he was right, because Jay Cutler, because I didn't do the 225. Like, you didn't have to as a quarterback. I didn't do anything. I threw. That was it. I didn't want to run. I was like, I'm a quarterback.
Look at this talent. Come on.
Exactly. I was like, I'll throw the ball. That's what I do on the field. But I didn't want to run a 40, because they are notoriously slow with their watches. By the way, shout out Mike Long Track in Tallahassee. Ran a 4.78. They asked me to line up and do it again. Ran a 4.82, and that was it. That was all she wrote. We could average it out and go at 4.8. Perfect. Just wanted to be below 5. Maybe wind aided, but we don't have to remember that. But Brady, Jay Cutler the year before, like, everyone was raving about Jay Cutler because he threw up 225. I forget, it was like 20 plus. It was a pretty big number. And I remember coming out of college, I could maybe do it like 8, maybe if on a good day. So that's why I didn't do it. And Brady's a big dude. Like, if you see Brady in person, like, he can work, like, he can move some weight. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The total was, the question was, what would be our total between Jeremy St. Louis, Chris Hassel, Brady, and me? How many 225s how many reps could we do? And we put it at 40. And they were like, no way could we do that. And Brady's like, yeah, I'll give you 20. I was like, all right. I was like, because I did get some old man strength later.
I'm going Brady, Danny, Jeremy, and then I'm putting Hassel in last as amount of.
No, listen,
Like Jeremy's
no
got
joke.
that
Like, if
pliable.
you don't work
Jeremy's in
out-
shape. Yeah.
225 getting it, like if you don't work out, like it can be
Yes.
tough to get up. And
If-
Hassel, could he get it
period.
once?
It can be tough to get up like at all. Like, I mean, I with a surge of momentum might be able to give you a couple, but I don't know if I could give you more than 3.
If
Yeah.
I got one up right now, I'd be thrilled. I would just put the bar back down and just like, thank you. I don't think I've put more than 200 on a bar since I was 25.
Yeah, I was waiting to do the B block, talk about college basketball, and I was like, Brady and Danny got to get y'all to 35 or 36 if you're gonna hit 40.
Once you hit this age, it's about maintaining, not building. I'm not trying to be
Exactly.
225.
100%.